The twin hearts of Elder Envoy Daron pounded, their rapid rhythm a reminder of the dread building in his mind. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to maintain a semblance of composure as he stood before the command screen. Outside, framed against a vast expanse of stars, 13 dark hulks drifted into formation, the Harrower fleet. Each vessel was a fortress, bristling with weaponry that could reduce planets to ash. They had arrived, the Eshar. A shadow passed over Darren's face as he recalled the stories. No, the warnings, that had circulated through the Union for generations. The Eshar were more than conquerors. They were creatures of annihilation, traveling from system to system with a cold efficiency, leaving ruin in their wake. They did not conquer for resources nor for pride. No, their demands were often trivial, bafflingly so. Entire worlds would kneel before them to keep something as small as a relic or a mineral sample. Their purpose, their ultimate aim, remained a mystery, but one truth had become painfully clear. Nothing and no one had ever successfully resisted them. Daron inhaled, steadying himself. This was the Union's only chance. The Eshar had entered their territory, and as envoy of the Elder Union, Daron was one of the 13 representatives sent to negotiate for peace. 13 voices, 13 different species, all holding their breath and hoping their combined efforts would appease the invaders. But Darren's hope faltered as his gaze shifted to the newest envoy among them, a human. Captain Wren stood apart, his posture relaxed but his eyes cold, calculating. The Union knew little of humans. They were recent members, joining the coalition only a few cycles ago. Their world, Earth, was distant from the Union's core systems, and the specifics of their history remained vague. Yet here he was, standing among the Union's oldest races, carrying the weight of his people on his shoulders. A subtle tremor of apprehension rippled through Daron as he considered Wren's presence. Union law required every member species to send a delegate, and while the humans had earned their seat, he worried about their readiness. Darren's own experience taught him that humans were bold, perhaps too bold, and he prayed that today would not be the day they displayed it. The Union could not afford reckless courage now. The screen flickered, and Darren's breath hitched. The commander of the Eshar appeared, seated with an unsettling calm. His face was striking, angular, and his eyes held a sharpness that seemed to pierce through the silence. He scanned the faces of the ambassadors, and Daron felt himself shrink under the gaze, as if the commander's vision was dredging out every hidden fear. Forcing his mouth to move, Daron stepped forward and spoke, keeping his tone reverent. "Exalted Commander of the Eshar, we are honored by your presence. We come with open hands, to offer what we can in hopes of peace." The commander's expression remained impassive, but his gaze narrowed slightly, the barest flicker of disdain. He gestured dismissively with one hand. "Begin and make it worth my time," he said, his voice low, resonant, and unyielding. The first ambassador, a diplomat from the verdant world of Silax, stepped forward, voice trembling. He offered several of his people's richest mineral moons, hoping the Eshar would find them valuable. Another delegate, a lithe figure from the water world Imra, followed, sacrificing a portion of her planet's oceans. Each representative took their turn, surrendering pieces of their worlds, their legacies. And as they did, Daron sensed a quiet desperation among them. This wasn't merely diplomacy, it was survival. Finally, it was Captain Wren's turn. Daron felt his heart rate spike, a dread creeping up his spine. Wren stepped forward, but unlike the others, he did not bow or offer a gesture of respect. Instead, he folded his arms, his gaze unflinching as he met the commander's eyes. "Commander," he said, his tone calm but firm, "we humans cannot give you anything from our controlled space." Daron felt the blood drain from his face. His hands clenched at his sides, and he struggled to contain the gasp rising in his throat. The room fell silent, the tension thick as the commander's gaze fixed on Wren, an inscrutable darkness in his eyes. "Nothing," the commander repeated, his voice colder, each syllable like ice. His fingers drummed on the console, a rhythmic pulse of growing irritation. Ren held his ground, his lips curving in the faintest hint of a smile. But we can offer you a good, strong reminder that you're not as intimidating as you think you are. A stunned silence gripped the room. Daron stared, horrified, while the other ambassadors seemed frozen, too afraid to even breathe. The commander's eyes gleamed, his demeanor shifting from cold detachment to something far more intense, almost intrigued. Do you mean to imply defiance, human? His words were a challenge, each one sharper than the last. Ren's gaze didn't waver. Not imply. I'm stating it clearly. We humans don't bend. We've been forged by challenges, honed by hardship. You won't be the exception. A flicker of something unreadable crossed the commander's face, and then unexpectedly he laughed. It was a low, ominous sound, growing louder, filling the room with a strange resonance that felt neither wholly human nor Eshar. Finally, he murmured, almost to himself, as his laughter faded. Finally, I've found what I've been seeking. Daron glanced between the commander and Run, confusion mingling with fear. His own voice trembled as he asked, "Seeking?" "Yes," the commander replied, his gaze never leaving Run. "Your kind, yes, we are alike in a way I had thought lost. We of the Eshar have roamed for ages, testing our might against weaklings who bore no spirit, no will to fight. Until now." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "I have found you." Ren's jaw tightened, his posture straightening. "And why do you think we're anything like you?" The commander's sneer softened, just barely, into something almost admiring. "Because you are strong. Because you do not cower." He glanced briefly at the other ambassadors, a shadow of contempt in his gaze. "Unlike these?" He returned his attention to Run, an intense curiosity flickering in his eyes. "And now, human, we shall see just how far your strength extends." The grand hall, a chamber built to inspire awe, now felt more like a prison, thick with tension. Its walls echoed with the hushed desperation of ambassadors who had, just moments ago, entered with hope, only to feel that hope dissolved under the weight of the Eshar commander's gaze. One by one, each envoy stepped forward, shoulders heavy, voices trembling, to offer up pieces of their worlds. The Eshar demanded tribute, and each ambassador was willing to surrender a part of their species' future for the safety of their present. Ambassador Talix from the verdant world of Silax was the first to speak. His emerald green eyes were dim as he extended a hand toward the commander's looming presence on the screen. "Commander," he began, his voice just shy of breaking, "we offer the fertile moons of Silax as tribute. 3 of them, rich in ores and flora, ripe for harvest. They can supply your fleets, fuel your ships, and perhaps be a token of peace." The commander's expression remained unmoved. He offered neither acknowledgement nor encouragement, his steely gaze unyielding. Talix took a step back, his face pale as the next ambassador, Lady Zira from the oceanic world of Imra, moved forward. Her slim, aquamarine form shimmered with an otherworldly glow, but there was no pride in her stance, only resignation. "Great commander of the Eshar," she said softly, almost pleadingly, "Imra's seas are abundant with rare minerals, found nowhere else in the Union. Our ocean floors can provide you with sustenance, materials, perhaps something unique." She faltered, her voice dwindling as she awaited a response that never came. Like Talix, she retreated, her hopes drowned in silence. Daron watched each ambassador make their offerings, his own heart sinking deeper with each sacrifice. Vast territories, rich resources, even cultural artifacts, the most precious remnants of their civilizations, all surrendered in the desperate hope that the Eshar would be satisfied with such gifts and leave their worlds intact. And all the while, the commander sat in stoic silence, his eyes scanning them as one might study fragile creatures trapped behind glass. But then, the silence broke. Captain Run, the human, stepped forward with a defiant glint in his eye, his gaze unflinching as he stared directly at the commander. Unlike the other ambassadors, he held himself with a quiet strength, arms folded, his posture unyielding. "Commander," Ren began, his voice steady and calm, "we humans have no territories or resources to offer you. We cannot give you what we have built, nor what we need to survive." His tone was resolute, cutting through the air like a blade. Daron felt his stomach twist, his twin hearts hammering faster with each word that left Ren's mouth. The other ambassadors turned, their faces masks of shock and fear. Some looked on in horror, others in incredulity. Was this human truly defying the Eshar? Daron tried to catch Ren's eye, silently willing him to reconsider, to temper his words. But Ren stood firm, his face unyielding. The Eshar commander's gaze sharpened, a flicker of something dark passing through his eyes. "Nothing," he echoed, voice laced with disbelief and menace. His fingers tapped on the armrest of his command chair, the sound an ominous rhythm that filled the hall. Ren met the commander's gaze head-on. "Nothing," he replied, his voice steady as stone. "But I can offer you something else. A reminder that you're not as invincible as you believe." A hush fell over the room, and the tension thickened, a tangible force pressing down on them all. Daron's breath caught, and he could feel the unease radiating from the other ambassadors. What was Ren doing? The Eshar would destroy them all for this. The commander's eyes gleamed with a strange intensity, his lips twisting into a smile that was more predatory than amused. "Do you mean to challenge us, human?" he asked, each word laced with a dangerous edge. Ren didn't flinch. "Call it what you like," he replied. "But humans don't bend easily. We have faced threats. We have survived hardships, and we will not cower before yours." Daron's hand went instinctively to his chest, his heart's thundering as he braced himself for the commander's reaction. This was it, he thought. They would all be wiped out because of one human's reckless courage. He could feel the despair of the other ambassadors, the silent, pleading glances cast in Ren's direction. But the human seemed immune to fear, standing there as if he alone could face down the might of the Eshar. The commander's laughter broke the silence, a low, resonant sound that sent chills through the room. It was a laugh devoid of warmth, filled instead with a cold, predatory delight. "Finally," he murmured, his voice carrying an undercurrent of dark satisfaction. "Finally, I have found what I've been searching for." Ren arched a brow, his gaze unwavering. "And what is that, Commander?" The commander leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a twisted admiration. "A spirit that does not bow. I have traveled across systems, tested species who claimed strength, only to find them brittle, ready to shatter under the weight of their own fear. But you are different." A flicker of recognition passed through Ren's eyes, but he did not let his guard down. "Different, perhaps," he replied, voice calm. "But that doesn't mean we'll be easy to conquer." The commander's smile widened, a feral glint in his eye. "Conquer?" he repeated, a hint of amusement in his tone. "No, human. I do not wish to conquer. Not yet." He glanced at the other ambassadors, his gaze sweeping over them like a scythe. "The rest of you are weak, tethered by your fear of loss. But this 1 inch," he nodded toward Ren, "carries a strength your union has long forgotten." A murmur rippled through the hall as the ambassadors exchanged nervous glances. Daron's mind raced, struggling to understand. Was the commander impressed? And what did that mean for them all? The commander's gaze returned to Ren, his expression a strange mixture of amusement and challenge. "Human, I propose a test. A contest of our strengths, our resolve, not through the brute force of war, but through trials of skill and courage. Win, and you'll earn not only my respect, but the loyalty of all who would follow strength in this galaxy." Ren's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "And if we lose?" The commander's smile grew colder. "Then you will bend, as all others have before you." Daron's mind spun, grappling with the weight of what had just transpired. The stakes had been raised, and their survival now hinged on a gamble, one that no one but Ren seemed prepared to make. In the strange silence that followed, Daron found himself caught between fear and awe, his twin hearts thundering as he struggled to comprehend the turn of events. The Eshar commander, the dreaded figure who had reduced civilizations to ruin with a single command, now seemed almost interested. It was a dangerous interest, of course, but there was something different in his eyes as he regarded Captain Ren. A flicker of respect, an echo of kinship that Daron hadn't expected. The hall, once filled with despair, now hummed with a tentative, uneasy anticipation. The other ambassadors exchanged furtive glances, bewildered and wary, unsure what to make of the exchange. Could it be that the Eshar sought something other than conquest? Daron felt a faint hope stirring, but he quickly quelled it. The Eshar had destroyed countless worlds. They didn't respect anything other than power, and Ren's defiance, while remarkable, was still just words. But the commander's attention remained fixed on Ren, a gleam of curiosity in his predatory gaze. He leaned forward, his voice a low, dangerous murmur that seemed to resonate through the chamber. "Human," the commander began, "you speak of resilience, of an unwillingness to bend. You remind me of something our kind has long forgotten, a strength rooted in defiance, in unity." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But tell me, Captain Ren, do you truly understand what it means to survive in the face of unyielding force?" Ren's gaze held steady, his stance firm. "We may be young to the Union, but we've survived trials that would break most. Humans don't flinch from struggle, and we don't surrender our ideals just because someone else has a bigger fleet." The commander's lip curled, though not in anger. It was as if Ren's words had struck a chord, stirring something deep and dormant. "Interesting," he murmured, his tone almost introspective. "For ages, my people have roamed the stars, searching for worthy challengers, only to find weakness cloaked in arrogance. We conquer, not for resources, but to prove our strength, to remind the galaxy that the Eshar are unbreakable." A murmur swept through the chamber. The ambassadors shifted uneasy as they absorbed the revelation. Daron's mind reeled, struggling to process this glimpse into the Eshar's motives. They were conquerors, yes, but conquerors with a strange, almost obsessive need for validation. It was not about the spoils of war. It was about the challenge, the thrill of testing their might against those who dared resist. Ren's expression hardened, his gaze unwavering as he took in the commander's words. "So that's what this is about?" he asked, voice edged with disdain. "You're looking for someone to test yourself against, like some cosmic sport? You reduce lives, civilizations, to a game?" The commander's gaze flickered with something close to admiration. "Perhaps it is a game, human, but one with purpose. Weakness invites ruin. We of the Eshar refuse to allow weakness to spread. We bring ruin to purge the fragile, to remind the galaxy of strength. And yet," he paused, his gaze intense, "you are different. In you, I sense a will to stand unbroken, a fire that refuses to be snuffed out. Such fire is rare, even among the stars." Daron felt a shiver run through him. The commander's words, though spoken with a strange respect, were still chilling. To the Eshar, weakness was a plague, something to be eradicated. And yet they admired strength in others, a twisted respect reserved only for those who resisted. He glanced at Ren, wondering if the human understood the gravity of the commander's intentions. Ren, however, showed no hesitation. "If strength is all you respect, Commander, then you're more lost than I thought," he replied, voice unwavering. "Strength alone isn't enough. It's our unity, our purpose, that gives us resilience. We don't just survive, we build, we protect each other. That's why the Union stands." The commander's eyes narrowed, his expression thoughtful. "Unity," he repeated, as though tasting the word. "Purpose. Yes, this is what you possess that the Eshar have forgotten. We have grown too accustomed to conquest, to domination. Perhaps there is something we might yet learn from you." The statement shocked everyone in the room, Daron included. A glimmer of realization dawned on him. Could it be that the Eshar, in all their brutality, felt a hollow ache, a lack of the very unity they scorned? Had they roamed the stars, not just for conquest, but in search of something deeper, something they had lost? The commander straightened, his gaze piercing as he addressed the ambassadors. You, weak though you are, have something we do not: cohesion. You stand together, even if only out of fear. And you, human, he looked directly at Rin, embody the defiance, the strength that once drove the Eshar to greatness. It is for this reason that I will not demand your worlds or resources. Instead, I propose a test, one that will determine whether your union deserves to stand. Ren's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. A test? The commander's smile was cold, calculating. Yes, a series of trials, not fought with brute force, but with cunning and skill. Your ship against mine, human, not for territory or resources, but for something far greater: the loyalty of this union. If you succeed, you will earn my respect and the assurance that the Eshar will not destroy your worlds. But if you fail... His voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken threat lingering in the air, a dark promise of ruin. The ambassadors looked to one another, fear etched in their faces. Daron could feel the weight of their collective anxiety, their dread at the stakes now laid before them. If Rin failed, it wouldn't just be his species that suffered. The Union, already fractured by fear and uncertainty, could fall apart. The Eshar would divide and conquer, picking off the weakened worlds one by one. But Rin met the commander's gaze without flinching. You want a test? Fine. But know this. I'm not doing this just to prove a point. I'm doing it to protect my people, to protect this union. His voice was firm, resolute. And we don't lose easily. The commander inclined his head, a strange, approving gleam in his eye. Good. Then let the trials begin. The screen flickered, and the Eshar's dark visage vanished, leaving the chamber in a tense silence. Daron felt his shoulders sag with a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had been spared immediate annihilation, but the future was far from certain. He looked over at Ren, whose expression was as determined as ever. Daron could see the weight of responsibility in the human's eyes, the understanding that this was more than just a contest of strength. It was a battle for the soul of the Union itself. As the other ambassadors began to murmur, some casting hopeful glances at Ren, Daron allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps, just perhaps, they had found in this human the spark that could reignite their unity, their purpose. And as they waited for the trials to begin, Daron realized that, for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. As the diplomatic chamber emptied and the ambassadors filed out in tense silence, Captain Rin moved to a secluded corner to review his ship's status. The first trial was imminent, and though he hadn't been told the specifics, he knew the Eshar would craft it to exploit any weakness they could find. Daron watched from a distance, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Rin wasn't just fighting for his own people, but for the fragile unity of the entire Elder Union. The Union fleet had gathered on the outer rim of the system, an uneasy alliance of mismatched vessels, each designed by worlds with vastly different priorities. Their combined power was formidable, but coordination was frail. Ships of every shape and size dotted the void, from the slender spear-like designs of the Raxery to the massive, lumbering fortresses of the Galtani. The captains of each vessel waited, caught between hope and fear, watching for any sign of the Eshar's trial. Run, receiving final status reports from his crew, projected a calm confidence that Daron envied. Daron approached him, noting the hard, steady gaze that had so rattled the Eshar commander. Captain Run, Daron said quietly, are you truly prepared for this? The Eshar's tests are likely to be unconventional. Rin glanced over, a small smirk breaking through his otherwise stoic expression. Prepared? No. But that's never stopped us before. His voice was steady, but held an undertone of tension. We don't know what they're planning, but we'll adapt. We always do. Before Daron could respond, a low, pulsing tone echoed through the chamber. The lights dimmed, and a cold voice filled the air, the unmistakable sound of the SR commander. Representatives of the Elder Union, the commander intoned, his voice a smooth blade slicing through the silence. Your first trial has begun. This will be a test of endurance, unity, and resolve. A flicker appeared on the Union fleet's shared display, showing a field of asteroids drifting ominously close to a dying star. The star's erratic flares pulsed dangerously, and the scattered asteroids were thrown into chaotic orbits by gravitational waves and intense radiation. To survive, the commander continued, you must traverse the crucible of flares, a gauntlet of volatile celestial bodies. Only those who reach the other side will be deemed worthy. His voice dropped, a note of amusement creeping in. But beware, not all ships are strong enough to withstand the trials of fire. Weakness will be purged, as it always has been. The communication cut off abruptly, and Run exchanged a grim look with Daron. Around them, ambassadors and captains voiced their concerns in a flurry of anxious whispers. The crucible of flares was a known phenomenon, but only the bravest or most foolhardy of vessels dared approach it. The star's flares could melt hulls, disrupt energy shields, and wreak havoc on navigation systems. Darren's face paled. This trial is madness. It's a death sentence. Ren shook his head. Not necessarily. The SR want to test our resilience, see if we'll stick together. They're watching to see if we'll abandon each other at the first sign of danger. As the fleet aligned itself toward the crucible, Ren sent out a message to the other ships. This is Captain Run of the human vessel Resolute. We need to work as a team. Keep close to my ship's coordinates and follow our navigational data. Together, we'll get through this. Daron held his breath, watching the replies trickle in. A few captains responded with affirmations, their trust tentative but genuine. Others expressed reluctance, uncertain whether following a relatively unknown species into a death trap was a sound decision. Yet, in the end, most agreed, forming a loose formation around the Resolute as they approached the fiery gauntlet. The trial began in earnest as the fleet crossed the boundary into the crucible. Almost immediately, a wave of gravitational turbulence jolted the ships, pulling them out of formation. The human crew worked frantically, correcting their course while recalibrating shields against the radiation. Ren's voice crackled over the comms, steady and unfazed, guiding the ships back into position. His words held a confidence that steadied even the most hesitant of captains. As the first flare burst from the star, sending tendrils of searing plasma through the asteroid field, one of the Union vessels, a sleek craft from the Andre, struggled to maintain its shield integrity. Daron heard its captain's voice, panicked and filled with dread. Resolute, we're losing power. We can't hold out much longer. Without hesitation, Ren gave the order. Reroute a portion of our shield to cover their ship. We'll take the heat for a while. Daron was taken aback by the audacity of the move. The Resolute was already straining, and diverting power to shield another ship was a dangerous gamble. But Ren's crew followed his command without question, stabilizing the Andre vessel long enough for them to make emergency repairs. As they pressed on, several ships mirrored Ren's gesture, sharing shields and resources whenever one of their number lagged behind or showed signs of faltering. The crucible threw everything it had at them. Flares erupted with alarming frequency, sending waves of plasma across their path. Asteroids hurled into their midst, threatening to scatter their formation, but Ren's steady voice kept them on course, his directions as precise as they were calming. Despite the danger, the fleet held together, defying the SR's expectation of disunity. As they neared the end of the field, a sudden tremor shuddered through the Resolute, followed by the sharp sound of alarms. A piece of debris had struck their hull, damaging their primary thrusters. Daron watched Ren's face, expecting panic, but the captain remained focused. Get us through this last stretch, Ren ordered calmly. We're almost there. Another ship, a heavily armored cruiser from the Valari, took position in front of the Resolute, shielding them from further debris. Daron felt a surge of gratitude and admiration